save me from myself. Ooh, be gentle with myself. God knows this time I'll never lose myself. Now I know I can change the world without changing myself. God, protect me, shield me with your light. Heal those who are conflicted with me inside. I'm growing every day. Release me from this pride. Turn anger into peace and lead with my inner child. Little bird, don't cry. I know you hurt your wing when you fell outside. Some will cheer, the flight is over. And doubt give grace, but don't you walk away. And you will find your power. Little bird, wait. And you will fly again. No fear. High like an airplane. You never felt before. Well, people never ever say when they're hurting. You gotta know which way the wind is blowing and change direction to find where love is. Know that life will test the favor all the time. Seasons, while they change, keep holding on. Fly high. I'm gonna teach you and pick you up when you're torn in pieces. Time to embrace when you face it, it will go your way. scriptures they'll say, blessed rather are those who hear the word of God and obey, and you will find your power, little bird, wait, and you will fly again, no fear, high like an airplane, and you will find your power, little bird, wait, and you will fly again, no fear, high like an airplane. High, 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 little bird, fly, 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 so high, like an airplane. You will fly high, so high. Go, baby, go, baby, go, baby. Hope that God forgives your You're sent from heaven. I just hope you follow your dreams. You're one of a kind, and you're the reason why there must be a heaven. You're another reason to believe love is pure and kind. You are a light that was sent from heaven. Loving yourself is free. Please never change. Holy Spirit through my veins. This must be from heaven, heaven. Live and direct from heaven. I know God's listening from heaven, heaven, heaven. God sent you here from heaven, 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 heaven. God sent you here from heaven, heaven, heaven.
Colleagues, hello. If we could come inside and settle down, we'll start in about 2 minutes. You can sit there. Okay. Judy, can we ask people to come inside? Okay. Okay. Are your guys here?
No, we're going to take a link. Remember, I work for a sponsor shop.
Okay. Sit. All right. I know, you want to charge your thingy. Okay, no problem. I wasn't wed to that space.
I was nervous
Why?
that you were going to be wedded.
To my space? It's always a chance, but you know, you. Okay. Okay, welcome everyone. If we could just settle down. My name is Zaid Kimi. I'm the director of the Foundation for Human Rights, and I'd like to welcome you all here to this press conference on our constitutional damages case. I'd just like to remind everyone that the full set of papers is now available, and the web address is up on these little posters, but any of my colleagues will help you out if you're still looking for details. Of course, I'm going to introduce the panelists who will make a brief input, and then we'll take some questions. Just some general remarks. Of course, we're only here seeking truth and justice because of the efforts of the families who are involved. Not only the 25 families who have signed on to this case, but numerous other families who are supporting the case and are looking forward to a positive outcome. I'm not going to name everyone, but some of those families are here. I think we have, as part of the audience, representatives of the Matabula, New Yorker, Nhlapo, Motasi, Mazwembe, Simelane, families. My colleagues will let you know who the designated people are to speak to in those families. Each of the families has identified one or two spokespeople that you can approach for further comment. And in particular, I'd like to in addition to the families, of course, we've been supported by the legal team. Odette Geldenhuys is the head of pro bono at Weber Wenzel, and her colleagues, she and her colleagues have delivered an awesome service and support in finalizing this case. In particular, Jos Venter, Lisa Marie Dobel, and Nkosinati Tema, who are part of the legal team. And then, of course, I do have to thank our legal counsel, the legal team that have supported and run this case. Howard Varney, who's been our lead counsel on this case. Matthew Chaskelson, who finalized the papers for us. Ty Scott, Musandawiwa, and Lene Brighton were all part of the legal team. So with that, I'm going to just also remind you that the event is being live streamed and there are bunches of photographers around. So if you have, you feel slightly awkward about being pictured or photographed, I'm sorry, but it is assumed that you're on camera all the time for that reason. I'm going to now just call on the panelists. I've already mentioned Odette Geldenhuys, who's the head of Weber Wenzel's pro bono team. My colleague Yasmin Suka, who's been effectively driving this issue since the closure of the TRC. Lucanio Talata, who's the son of Fort Talata, a member of the Cradock Four. Alegria Nyoka, sister of Caiphas Nyoka. And Chidiso Motasi, the son of Irene Motasi. So I'm going to give each of them a couple of minutes to make a short statement, and then I'll take questions from the audience. So I'll start with you, Odette. You can take this one. Huh? Yes.
Good morning, everyone. If I can give the media here just the scoop of the day, and that is, please read the papers. It reads like one part tragedy and one part political intrigue. Tragedy because there are few victims who have survived apartheid-era atrocities. There are many, many, many thousands of victims who have died because of apartheid-era atrocities. And that's the generational pain that comes with that is ongoing. And the other part is that of political intrigue. So when you read the papers, I think it's going to be unlike any other court papers that you've read, because unfortunately it's not fiction. These are facts, the facts of political interference in the work of the National Prosecuting Authority, which has resulted in apartheid-era crimes not having been prosecuted. And as a result of those very many, more than 2 decades of delay, not only are the victims dead, but the perpetrators have died, are dying, and they are strewn, so these bodies are strewn throughout the papers. My task now is just to give you an extremely broad bird's eye view of this application. The application is brought by a number of families, and please make sure that you, as the media, read each of their very, very brief stories, which is part of the media pack. It's very emotional to read those stories. And it's because of them that we do this legal work, and that we do this legal work on a pro bono basis. They have come together to ask certain parties, to ask the court for relief against certain parties. And those parties are the following people. It's the President of the Republic of South Africa. It's the government of the Republic of South Africa. It's the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development. It's the Minister of Police. It's the National Commissioner of Police. And it's the National Director of Public Prosecutions. Those are the parties against whom the relief is asked of. We'll hopefully get into it during question time, but what are these families who have suffered these human rights atrocities, what are they asking for? They're asking basically for 2 very broad things. The first is for the President to establish a commission of inquiry to investigate why there has been, and I'm using both present and past tense purposefully, why has there been this political interference in the work of the independent National Prosecution Authority to investigate and prosecute these cases, the cases which had been handed over from the TRC when it finished its business to the NPA. The founding affidavit by Lucanio, supported by the affidavits of the other families, put down in great detail the facts of this political interference, where it happened, how it happened, and by whom it was perpetrated. So there should be no reason why the President should not establish this commission of inquiry. The second relief that's being asked for is what we in law call constitutional damages. And just really also in a nutshell, what that means is what the court is being asked to order from the government are sums of money which will be of assistance to all families, to all victims of apartheid-era atrocities, to do certain things. And those things are to investigate and prosecute cases in which there are still perpetrators to be prosecuted. It will be funds available to keep a watching brief over the work of the National Prosecuting Authority and the police. I can speak from personal or from our professional experience. When one has that eye, that watching brief over the work of the police and the NPA, they do seem to find the time and the resources to do these cases, and then we do see results. And the final is, our history in South Africa moves so fast, And we're already in a generation now where our children don't know what apartheid was. Our children don't know what had happened during apartheid. Our children don't know who had died and who had sacrificed their lives for the country in which we are today. And so some of the funds will be available for memorialization of victims of apartheid era atrocities. After this case was launched, filed in the court on Monday, it was served on the president, the government, and these the Minister of Police, the Minister of Justice, the NPA on Tuesday, so they know about the case, and so now the time has started to run for them to answer, and so they have until the 10th of February to file what we in law call a notice of intention to oppose. So we will know around about the 10th of February what the view of, I'm just calling it, the state parties are. So thank you, and I'll take some more questions afterwards.
I think just go straight.
Good morning, everybody. It's really good to see all of you. And as Odette has said, I would urge you to read the papers, because it tells the story really of the journey that victims and their families of apartheid-era crimes have had to travel. It talks about the long struggle. And just before we began, Allegria and I were saying that actually, I think we started walking this journey as far back as 1994, when we began to think about, how could we put together a victims movement so that we could actually discuss these issues around justice and accountability for victims and their families. And so as someone who had the privilege to serve on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I feel a profound sense of heartbreak and moral outrage sitting here before you today. The families of victims who gave up their lives in the fight against apartheid should not have to relive their trauma through the courts simply to demand what is their right: truth, justice, and accountability. We know that the apartheid regime was a criminal state that violated the very essence of humanity. Its atrocities, recognized globally as crimes against humanity, have left deep scars that could only begin to heal through this process of truth and accountability and reparations. And these were not just legal obligations for our state, they were also moral imperatives, and yet it is our democratic state that we elected that has failed us. The TRC was a constitutional compact, a promise to the victims and to the nation. Amnesty was a necessary compromise for a peaceful transition, but it came with conditions. It was never meant to shield those who refused to seek amnesty or who were denied it. And so as the TRC, when we handed over around 300 cases for prosecution in 1998, we trusted that justice would follow. Instead, the deliberate political interference, which is set out in these papers, constitutes a decision that abandoned victims and cast aside the principles of dignity, accountability, and truth. The Supreme Court of Appeals in the Timor case found it perplexing and inexplicable that the TRC cases were suppressed, especially as the report of the TRC advocated a bold prosecution policy. The political interference is not just perplexing, but amounts to a miscarriage of justice. a betrayal, really, of the victims who fought and died for our freedom, and also a betrayal of the values our democracy claims to stand up for equality, justice, and the rule of law. And this failure is more than just about broken laws. The failure to implement legal obligations and the dereliction of duty. It is about a failure of conscience. And by turning away from the responsibility to prosecute apartheid-era crimes, the state has deepened impunity in our country. It has shattered our trust and inflicted irreparable harm on the very fabric of our society. The contempt that has been shown to the victims, their families, and even former TRC commissioners is nothing short of shameful. It reflects a moral decay that undermines the very heart of our democracy. How can we claim to be a society that is rooted in human dignity while ignoring the cries of those who suffered? How can we speak of justice while allowing the powerful to evade accountability? This is not just a legal issue that you see reflected in these papers. It is about a moral reckoning that is overdue in our country. And we must confront this legacy of inaction and betrayal, not for appearances, but because it is the right thing to do. The victims and their families deserve more than apologies and platitudes. They deserve justice that they were promised, and we as a nation must find the moral courage to deliver it. And so let this application that we have launched be a call to action for our leaders, our institutions, and every one of us. Justice delayed is not just justice denied. In our country, it has become humanity that is denied. And that is what we read when we see these papers. It's actually shocking when you put together what has happened over the last 25 years in our country. So I would urge all of you to read the papers and to take up the cudgels to make sure that victims are finally able to realize the justice that they are entitled to.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lukhanya Talat. I am here representing my father's family, Fort Talata family, and obviously by extension as part of this legal action, a whole number of other families. It's a very sad day for me to actually sit here today and be part of an application or legal challenge like this against the state. Because this is not what let me speak about myself, this is not what I wanted. I would have preferred the state to have acted when it had the time to do so, to prosecute my father's killers and to allow justice for me, my mother, my sisters, and to create the kind of society where my father's life, no matter the fact that he was a black man, that it actually meant that his life mattered. So when successive ANC-led administrations failed to do that, it told me that my father's life, Fort Talat, that Matthew Goniwe's life, Sparom Konto's life, Stelom Mhlauli's life, who became known as the Kredok Four, that their lives didn't matter in a government that's led by the African National Congress. It's sad for me to be at this point where I have to go to court just to get what was duly mine. Justice. I remember many occasions when we had met in meetings, and and the former deputy, or the late Deputy Secretary General of the African National Congress, Jesse Duarte, was in those meetings with us, and we were talking about our pursuit of justice. And I remember saying to her once that I wasn't coming to her or to the African National Congress or the government that it led at the time to ask for a tender so that we can become rich. All I said to her was that we were coming to them as the governing party, asking for justice. Justice is not the kind of thing where you can outsource. If I'm not happy with the treatment that I get at a public hospital, I can go to a private hospital and get treatment there. If I'm not happy with the level of education that my son gets at a public school, I can take him to a private school and get the kind of education that I feel he deserves there. But there is no other place for me to go to get justice other than to get it from the government. So if the government does not give me justice, what other option do I have? So myself and the rest of these families, with the assistance of the Foundation for Human Rights and Weber Wenzel, we drew up these papers to take the government to court, to give us what is rightfully ours, which is justice. We're not, like, genuinely, even out of the money that Odette raised, the money issue, the money that's going to come from there isn't going to come to us as individuals so that we can buy BMWs and Rolls Royces. The money is going to be kept in a trust to allow Tsidiso, if he wants to put up a memorial lecture for his parents, for him to know that there is money that's readily available for him to be able to honor his parents. For Mam Allegra to be able to do the same for her brother. So we're not here thinking of, no, we're not. We just want justice. And the ANC has proven itself completely incapable of delivering justice for the right reasons. So this is why this week we've had to file these papers to force the court to get the ANC and the government to admit to its failures and its obligations to give us justice for the lives of our fathers, our parents, our brothers and sisters. But also for us to have the truth around who the politicians were by trying to preserve a way of life that they felt entitled to. Yes, that's fine. We can't forgive them for killing our fathers. But I think it's even worse when the same people that were in the trenches with our fathers, our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, when those people then turned around and said, it's okay, Fort Kgalata does not deserve justice. Imagine that. Today you are walking with Fort, you go to his funeral, and you give us platitudes about how important, his sacrifice was, only to then turn around and deny him justice. We want to know who those people were within the ANC that decided that my father's life was not worth justice. And we're hoping that the court will force President Cyril Ramaphosa, because we've written him letters, we've asked nicely, and he's just continued to ignore us. So now let's see if we will be in a position to ignore the court when the court hopefully orders him to set up this commission of inquiry so that we can know the truth about who Who are the people inside the ANC that portrayed us, that allowed our fathers' killers to die with peace when we sat without any justice? So, towards the ANC and its leaders, I'm saying that without justice for me and my father and my family, they're not going to have peace, not now and not ever.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alegria Kutsakanyoka. I'm the sister to Caiphas Nyoka, who was a student activist, a member of COSAS that was brutally murdered by the security forces in 1987, sleeping in his bed. So we share the same sentiments of what Lucanio indicated, that we really feel betrayed as victims, as family of victims of the past apartheid era atrocities, that we waited patiently for years to get justice. And we thought when the new government came in power, they will solve and give us the truth that we have been longing to hear, and justice for our loved ones that were killed brutally. But unfortunately, nothing. The TRC came, we went, we presented our cases to their listening ears, and we could see they were sympathizing with us. Our cases were referred to NPA for further investigations and prosecutions. Unfortunately, I think the handing over, as Yasmin indicated, that they did that in 1998. But to date, our cases are still in limbo. For your case to be attended to, someone should come forward. Like in our case is on trial now, but we have been battling for almost 5 years. Now it is someone, one of the perpetrators, that went and confessed. But even so, our justice system is really unfair, because you find that the perpetrator is the one who has rights. We as victims, you are just pushed from pillar to post. You don't even know what is coming, what is going. So, to us, and to me, and to my family, we feel the government has a moral obligation to give us the truth. It has been long. My brother died 37 years ago. This year it will be 38 years. And we don't know the truth. Why had he to be killed sleeping? Those answers we need. And the only person we rely to give us that answer is the government. We don't have any power. We can't go to private. It is the justice system that should provide us with those answers. So why do these cases being swept under the carpet? What is the hush-hush for? Because These people died for the freedom that other people are enjoying. They didn't, they paid a huge sacrifice. But now the families are still suffering. We are undergoing trauma that we can't even describe. People will say, why 40 years you are still caring? Because we are looking for answers. We want to know what happened. Why had these people to be killed? So that is why the avenue that Lucanio and Odette explained of constitutional damages, it's another route which, as long as we live, I think we are also responsible to fight for our brothers, for our fathers, for our loved ones, whose lives were sacrificed for this freedom. So we cannot just relax. We'll fight until we die as well. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Tsidiso Mutasi. Yeah, I'm actually here because of my parents, Tumelo, Richard Mutasi, and Busisiwe Mutasi. To see the panel describing everything about the TRC, about the government not giving us justice is so sad. I mean, 38 years down the line, my parents have died. To me, it's like still trauma. The last time, 2 weeks ago, I went to my parents' home just to tell a bit of a story. It still feels like a crime scene. To understand that my government is still not doing anything. I have children now. My children still feel the pain that I feel. So for post-traumatic trauma, yes. My kids are going through that. My firstborn, you can see. You understand? So I would like the government to please put themselves in our shoes and understand our plea and support this. We ask them nicely, as you said, please, government, help us with this. We really need this. We need justice. We need closure. And again, just to say this, to tell the government this, just a bit, yes. Yeah, I just wanted to tell the government that the corruption of justice is a downfall of a nation. There were old ladies outside from Kulumani Kalela. They crippled, it's all sort of people. They're old. To see them in that state and crying for just justice. Just give us justice, nothing else. So I can't go on and keep on saying things time and time and again, but all we need is closure. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to take some questions. I'll take maybe 2 or 3 questions at once. I'm going to ask just members of the press to ask questions first, and then we may move on afterwards. So if you could please say your name, the organization you're from, and then your question, and I'll assist the panel in answering the questions. So, I mean, obviously Odette hasn't explained everything. Please go ahead.
Government with the plea for justice. Good morning, Busi Chimombe from the SABC. I've got a couple of questions. It's been over 25 years. Why now? I mean, this week, the Minister of Justice basically announced that there are going to be 19 new positions that are going to be filled to ensure that the TRC cases are put in focus. You're not encouraged by this? And I'm also asking because Advocate Nsebeza, in his review last year, or the year before last, of the TRC cases, basically said many of these cases are actually irredeemable because so much time has passed, memories have faded, and it's going to be very difficult to actually get justice for many of the victims of the apartheid atrocities. My other question is, you've asked for a commission to be set up by the president, by government. The issue is that we've seen what has happened with a lot of these commissions. They take a lot of time, they take a lot of money. Are you not afraid that the establishment of a commission will actually just stall the process a little bit further? Is there nothing that is a lot more that you could possibly ask for that will take less time and less effort? Yeah, those are my questions for now.
Thank you. Are there any others? I'm going to stick to members of the press for the moment, Nomarasha. So, go ahead. Oh, okay. You first, and we'll come back to you after.
Timon Smith, Sunday Times. Following on the question from the previous question from my colleague, what would you say the overall effect of the alleged political interference has been on the possibility for justice in most of these cases? And would you see the establishment of a commission to address specifically the issue of political interference as some sort of alternative justice that will now have to serve in some cases as the closest that people might be able to get in the wake of political interference's effects on the actual prosecution's process thus far?
Thank you for that. I think the one question was about the process that got us here. Perhaps Yasmin and Lucanio could just reflect briefly on the journey to get to this point. I think the other question was, why now? Why take this decision now? Let me just say in that respect, there were a number of cases that were handed over. As the Nsebeza Commission of Inquiry found, many of those cases are no longer going to be able to be prosecuted. So the prospect of justice in those cases has disappeared. The question that we're faced with is why that happened. Why were the opportunity not taken when they were available? So the question of why now is 10 years ago or earlier, there was still a possibility that many of these cases could be prosecuted successfully, but many of those cases have now passed beyond that point. And in particular, you could point to the Craddock 4 case. All of the perpetrators have died. People have got away with what they did. The question now is, how did they get away, and who was complicit in allowing them to get away? I think if everyone else wants to take the question on a commission of inquiry and what it could, what the purpose is, and the question perhaps, Odette, on the nature of the political interference as we understand it. Right. Let me start with Lucanio, just on the process, and Allegra, please.
All right. All right. So just around the process, I think Zaid was able to explain, a great deal. that we assumed that the successive ANC administrations would do the right thing by our fathers, brothers, mothers, everybody, by our loved ones. So when they didn't do so, we still acted, I suppose, in good faith from a lot of these families where, we kept on thinking, no, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. In the Craddock 4 case, when it became clear that nothing was going to happen, we then started pushing, just to get people to move while there was still a little bit of a window open for prosecutions. That window closed 2023 with the death of one of the last perpetrators that was there on the night my father was killed. So justice in that for a prosecution or through a prosecution would never going to happen because the people that killed my father were now all dead. So then how do we get justice? Justice then kind of takes a different form. It becomes about truth. So we still continue to push the inquest. The inquest was Minister Ronald Lamula announced last year, the year before, last year, that the inquest, the third inquest into the Craddock 4 would be reopened. So we then did that. 2nd of September we were in court. It was postponed to the 2nd of June this year, but at least it is on the court roll, so we are moving in that sense. But then now we need to know in terms of why there was interference. Who stopped those prosecutions? What role did former President Thabo Mbeki play? What role did the former director of the NPA, Bulelani Ngcuka, play? What does he know? What did Penuel Maduna know as a former justice minister? What did Jeff Radebe know as a former justice minister? What did former President Jacob Zuma do when he was in office in terms of the prosecutions or at least implementing the recommendations of the TRC? Because if that had happened, that would have meant that the recommendation to prosecute in the Craddock 4 case, that would have been implemented. So what happened? All of these, the NDPPs, the former president, the justice ministers, the DGs in justice, in police, and all of those people are sitting there with information. So what happened? So the process then was that once it became clear that we weren't going to get justice in, prosecutorial, that kind of justice, we then had to change tact, and then it becomes about truth. Let's get the truth out for all of these cases. If ANC comrades made themselves guilty of the crime of interfering with the work of the NPA and denying us justice, we need to know who they are, and they need to be held accountable, because that's not the kind of society for which my father died for. It's not. And if people are busy with criminal acts, man, we must get those people out from those positions, because it means that they are not doing what they're supposed to do. My father, Tsidiso's parents, Ma Alekri's brother, they died for us to be able to live in a particular kind of society. Now, what kind of society are we going to build if that is not built on a pillar of justice and truth? Because then we're wasting each other's time. That's why the guys can go and loot the bank of VBS as much as they could, because they know that there's not going to be any justice for them. That's why people can commit the kinds of crimes that they do in this country, because they know that that nothing's going to happen to them. They can act with impunity. When de Klerk died, he died completely dismissing us. Completely dismissing us. Why? Because he was never held accountable for the crimes that he committed. Now de Klerk's grandchildren continues to call us the K word because they've never seen black lives being honored and being given the value that they're worth because our government failed us. So the process is that we got to this point because the ANC failed us and we want justice. Justice now comes in the form of truth for many of our families. Thank you.
What people forget is that when you look at the legal obligations of the state in respect of the kind of violations that took place in our country, the obligation of the state is actually to investigate, to prosecute, and to ensure that victims and their families are able to access reparations. Now, in our country, there was a deal, and that deal was so that the new South Africa could come into being without any further bloodshed. But the deal also envisaged that if people didn't come forward and make disclosures about the violations and the crimes they had been involved in, when the TRC process was over, the law would follow its course and perpetrators would be investigated and prosecuted. Now, given the amount of time that the TRC had to deal with so many years of atrocity crimes, it was not able to complete all of the investigations. And so in 1998, when it handed the first set of reports over to the government of South Africa, the TRC handed over a list of around 300 cases with the specific instructions, a bold prosecution policy, investigate and prosecute. And had the NPA done so at that time, had the police made investigators available to investigate these cases, I think you would not see us sitting here today. In fact, for the families, they would have seen criminal accountability and perpetrators held accountable. Now, if you look at these papers, if you read them carefully, you will trace the journey that we have walked together with families. Simelane family, with this first case that came to the foundation, in fact, forcing us to actually go to meet with the NPA prosecutors and, in fact, to bring an action to set aside prosecution guidelines that effectively gave the perpetrators another opportunity not to be punished. And that's been the story of what has happened to the families of victims. The only time you've seen action from the state is when we have gone to the courts and where the courts have actually ordered that something needs to happen. Or when people get to the courts, suddenly the state says, okay, we're going to write to the Minister of Justice and give you an inquest. So when you look at, for instance, the Cradock 4 case, in May 2019, we made a presentation to the prosecution team, and we actually set out for them who the perpetrators were, what their particular criminal liability was, and we expected then that there would be action. In the ensuing years, all of them are dead. And so now we have to revert again to the question of, is another inquest going to give us the actual truth? So the reason we need this commission of inquiry is because when you look at what has happened every time we went to court, in the Timol case, in the Simelane case, you actually have had courageous NPA heads in the form of Vusi Pikoli, who lost his job, Anton Ackerman, who disclosed that in fact there was political pressure on him. When you actually look at the secret task teams that were set up, the minutes attached to the meetings they have, the question that you have to ask is, why? Why did the state choose to re-victimize the very victims who gave up their lives? And why did they take actions to actually prevent justice and accountability? And that's what the purpose of this commission of inquiry would be, to actually ask the question, what happened behind the scenes? Why was it necessary to suppress these cases? Why was there a moratorium on investigations and no prosecutions? I think we deserve to know the answers. And so this is about victims actually reclaiming their rights against the very state that should have protected that. I think somebody asked the question, another commission of inquiry? This would not be a big commission of inquiry. It doesn't, and of course it doesn't matter. Yeah. But I think that it's necessary to understand why successive governments since the Mbeki regime chose to deliberately suppress the TRC cases. What was in it for them? What didn't they want to have emerge as the truth of what happened in our past? The second part of the application is, of course, very important because it's not about the past only, but it's about the future. And it's about saying, we're not looking for individual damages for ourselves, but what we are looking for are the means to make sure that, in fact, we are able to carry out these investigations properly, that we are, in fact, able to mount private prosecutions if necessary, if they are alive, because remember, in the ensuing years, most of the perpetrators have died. Of course, there are some left, but we are yet to see them testify in the Nyoka case. And the other thing is, of course, memory. Memory, because this generation is carrying intergenerational trauma, and a constitutional damages, that sets up an independent trust will give the victims the means to be able to do all of those things. So it's future looking, using, in fact, what has happened in the last, I would say, 30 years to get us to a point where we can begin to look at what could be a better future about understanding the past. And I think the point you made, the impunity in our country is now embedded structurally. You see the same impunity with the state capture cases. And the only reason you could put forward is they got away with it once. Why won't the next lot get away with it? And that's what we have to stop for the sake of the integrity and the fundamental values set out in our Constitution.
Thanks, Yasmin.
I just want to agree with that phrasing or that Timon from Sunday Times used of speaking of the Commission of Inquiry and the potential outcomes and the constitutional damages as alternative justice, because the real justice would have been if the perpetrators were tried and convicted. Many cases that now can't happen. So that's what we're really looking at, is this forward-looking alternative form of justice. The other question was why now? And once again, I implore you all to read the court papers. It's not going to take very long because it's so fascinating. But you will see there that the families speak of their efforts to get the NPA to do something about what had happened to them, to their families, and meetings, efforts, representations. We've heard of meetings with Jesse Duarte, the clients, families in different parts of the country, the Highgate massacre victims and survivors from East London. Effort after effort to try and get something to move at the NPA. and so it's not as if these families who are bringing this application have just woken up and said, we want to go to court now. It comes after very, very many efforts. And then the timing of the announcement by the NPA that it's going to increase its staff component looking at the NPA cases, that's absolutely welcomed. However, that comes at a point when this application has been long in the making, and the NPA knows about this case. The government knows about this case because we have told them, we've asked them, as I said before, we've asked the President, can you please set up this commission of inquiry? We've been speaking with the NPA in these different cases. So it's not as if they don't know about this, they know about this. So the announcement is very welcomed, but a little bit too late. I think that's just, what I wanted to add. Sorry, and then just in terms of the political interference, I think because it sounds almost fantastical, once again, please read the papers because you'll find the 3 sources that for this political interference. The one is evidence that's on affidavit by different NPA persons who've been in the NPA, so that's evidence that's on affidavit. There are documents, as Yasmin noted, minutes of meetings, etc. And then there are also books that we reference. We've spoken and interviewed authors who have written about this past. This particular part of our history. And so it's 3 different sources of information, the triangulation of information to be able to make these factual statements in the court papers. Thank you.
Thanks, Odette. Just on that, just a further comment on that question of what the NPA does going forward. Yes, that's great. I think we can all recognize that since about 2017, there's been a change in the NPA, and they've been far more active in prosecuting these cases. This is not about what they're going to do next. It's about what happened and the systemic nature. We understand any individual case, maybe the evidence is not there. Maybe it's hard to find the perpetrators. But what we're talking about is case after case after case where the same thing happened, no prosecutions. And what we're looking for is the answer to the question, why? Is there an alternative to a commission of inquiry? Yes. In a perfect world, all of those people who'd come forward and tell the truth. They'd confess to what happened and they'd say, this is what we did and this is why we did it, and judge us on that basis. But that, we know, is not going to happen. So there is no alternative. The actual alternative is to do nothing, is to embed the culture of impunity, and then when the next big crime happens, we can all say, well, what do you expect? No one gets to pay for what they did. That's just the way the country works. So we either start it now or we give up. Let me take another round of questions. Yeah. Again, please just say your name, and if you do have a mic available, okay, you'll speak loudly.
Jack. Hi, hello everybody. My name is Treasure Zamini Kaplos. Have we become that kind of people that we just want so much justice out of people who have wronged us that we have no remorse, no forgiveness in the world? I mean, I've heard you guys speak about the things that have been happening in your lives and all that stuff. Are we no longer human beings? We speak of human rights. Are we no longer human beings to forgive each other, but carry out so much justice and not realize that whatever we are doing has so much injustice itself? We'll reclaim each other here.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Yeah, go ahead.
Hello, Raymond, Netwerk 24. I just want to know, why do you think the government hasn't acted on your pleas over
Stand up if you don't mind.
Sorry?
Can you stand
Oh.
a bit clearer?
Just want to know, why do you think the government hasn't acted on your pleas, as you've mentioned now, over the past 30 years? And then you talk about political interference. Do you have an idea who those politicians are, or is the reason behind the Commission of Inquiry and the court case to flush or identify who those individuals are? Thank you.
Thank you. Lenny, do you want to answer the first question? No? Do you want to?
I don't understand what the first question or what is he meant. Because it's like he says we're also, as seated here, we're perpetrating injustice. Don't we have a space for forgiveness? How do you forgive something you don't know? For me to forgive, it's if someone attests, you just don't forgive. We've learned to continue, because now, as we are saying, we went through trauma, psychological, and we learned to survive with that. But to forgive, I forgive someone who shows remorse that I did this. Maybe I was forced during that time. But if you don't even know, and that person is not showing any remorse, how do you forgive that person?
Yes, again, to you, my brother, as Mama Utetegusho, you ask about forgiveness, and you make it seem as if we're inhuman. Forgiveness is it's a long road, my brother. It's a long road. One, when I was 16, I met for the first time the perpetrator, a person who killed my parents. And he asked for forgiveness. I was 16, still in high school, a teenager. How do you ask a person to forgive you when you altered his whole life? I'm still living with this till now. Actually, when I'm now as an adult, I feel it worse, because all these visions and pictures, they come. It's just that I don't have the nightmares anymore. And then you ask me to forgive. My brother, you must do yourself introspection. Forgiveness is something else for each and every one of us here. Thank you.
No, yeah, so in terms of the political interference, when you go through the court papers and you look at the three sources that I mentioned, the affidavits, the documents, and then these two non-fictional books which have been written, certain names are mentioned there, certain politicians, certain high-ranking politicians, and so there's certainly information available as to who were involved at what stage during this last period, from 2003 when the TRC handed in its last report, until probably about 2017 or beyond that. But those politicians about who these statements are made, they need to also speak for themselves. And most importantly, they need to say if there had been this, if they had interfered, why they did it. And so you're absolutely right. The purpose of the Commission of Inquiry will be to establish once and for all who was involved, why they were involved, and who instructed them to stop these cases from being prosecuted by the NPA. As I said, who has always been an independent body and should have run its prosecutions as an independent body.
So if I may, I think it was 2021, in response to something that I had written, former President F.W. de Klerk, his foundation then issued a statement. And as part of that statement, he confirmed, I'm sure we could find that statement for you. The F.W. de Klerk confirmed that there had been an agreement between former generals and members of the apartheid government and some ANC leaders that there won't be any prosecutions. This was confirmed by F.W. de Klerk himself, right? So whatever, we need to find out who those people were that made that agreement with those apartheid generals. Because think about it like this. The ANC did not come to my house and knock on the door and say to my mother, Mrs. Khalata, we have this thing that's on the table here. Can we use Fort Khalata here? Can we say that we don't need justice for him? So whatever agreement that the ANC made with those former generals did not carry my family's, did not carry my family's mandate. So whatever agreement they made is got nothing to do with us. Tina, we want justice for Fort. Fort was my father. He was my father. Right? He was 28 years old when he was killed. He had a wife who was 26. His wife was pregnant 8 months. He had a daughter that was 9 years old, and he had me. I was 3 years old. It was 40 years ago this year. That was my father. He had a life. So when he was killed, we can go into the history and I can explain it for you. But the ANC had no right to go and make a deal about Fort, that Fort's family had nothing to say in. We weren't consulted. So whatever deal they made with the Boers has got nothing to do with us. ANC must fulfill its constitutional obligations to give us justice. It has failed to do so. There are still some opportunities, for instance, like in the Nyoka case, where it can still do that. In my instance, or the Craddock 4 instance, where we can do nothing more, then the ANC must help us to remember Fort. It must help us to, every year on my father's birthday, or on the day that he was killed, or on the day that he was buried, we as the family must, because we must have an avenue for us to be able to say, this is what Fort, this is who was for, this is who Fort was, this is who he died for, right? This is what he died for, and this is why we should remember him. That is what we have to do. And the ANC has got that responsibility as the governing party in this country. Well, not anymore, but as one of the parties in government, it's got that responsibility. And we are not going to let it go. Just because, Bona, they're more interested in corruption, in thieving, and doing all of those wrong things. Tina, we're not interested in that. We know how we got to where we are, and we can't forget. Because every time someone says to me, Mr. Khalata, it reminds me of my father.
I think we'll take one last round of questions. At the back.
Hi, everyone. My name is Buiso Njogo. I don't belong in any organization. However, I am one of people who were affected as well. I grew up with a mother who had a broken heart. She loved one of her sons very dearly. I come from a home where nobody at home was politically affiliated. but only my late brother was. My parents come from a humble home where both my parents worked as workers in a factory. My mother was a seamstress, my father worked in a metal factory. And the only thing that I know of my parents is that they're hardworking individuals. And they just so happened that they had one particular son who was an extraordinary individual. And he was killed in 1992 on the 22nd of July in Isipingo. He wasn't the only victim there. However, my family had never gotten justice in such a way that there were three individuals, three young men who were killed in the same veracity, same situation. However, my family never got justice. Only one person got justice out of the three. It's been 33 years this year. My brother has been gone. My mother passed away about a little bit over a year ago. Her heart still yearns. Today she sleeps over my brother, whom is late. And I'm here in solidarity of his spirit, and I'm here of other families who never got anything. The only thing that my family ever got was a letter that invited my parents to come to the Truth and Reconciliation. But because my parents were working parents who couldn't leave work, who couldn't find time to even go and attend any of it, my family was left in the dark. Where else? Only one person amongst the three who was killed got justice. I would like to know what kind of reconciliation happens to kind of families whereby there were a collective, but amongst the collective, only one seemed to have gotten justice and the rest were forgotten. My brother was such an amazing individual in such a way that his funeral amongst with the other two was such a big funeral in Lamontville. And he was a leader to a great youth in such a way that a poem was written about him as well. So it's a legacy that I hold as well. I just want to know, those type of families, where do they go for help? Because my mom waited for years and years in such a way that my brother in my township is one of the known fallen heroes, but nothing at all of my family knows. So yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we leave it there. I think you can talk to the colleagues afterwards. Let's not have a dialogue on that issue. Thank you. I think the people on the panel, you're available to answer more questions and to conduct short interviews if you need them. Thank you very much. Thank you to the family members and colleagues and the colleagues from Kulumani Galela as well. We appreciate your presence. So thank you, everyone, and we'll leave it there.
Still haven't found the live stream.